Hello students and welcome to our today's video tutorial. In this video we are going to study about chapter number 1, The Selfish Giant. It is written by Oscar Wilde. So let us first read about the author. Oscar Wilde, from 1854 to 1900, he was a prolific Irish author who wrote plays, fiction, essays, epigrams and poetry. He graduated from Oxford University and was one of the most popular playwrights of his times. He took an active part in the fashionable society of London and depicted its customs and habits in his plays with great humor. He also wrote moral stories for children. The Selfish Giant was part of his collection The Happy Prince and Other Tales, published in 1888. So this story, The Selfish Giant, that we are going to read now is a part of one of his collection, The Happy Prince. So let us start this chapter. The Selfish Giant. Let us just see what it is written. The Selfish Giant is a short story about a giant who lives alone in his castle. Okay, so a giant used to live alone in his castle, which has a beautiful garden. He is selfish and dislikes children. He doesn't like children. But when spring refuses to visit his garden, he learns to appreciate children and grow to love them immensely. Okay, so what is being said here? Every afternoon, as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. So just after the school was getting finished, the children used to go where? To the giant's garden, and there they used to play in the garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. So the garden was very beautiful, and garden belongs to giant. And in that garden one can see soft green grass spread everywhere and beautiful flowers which look like stars. And there were peach trees also, that in the season of spring they used to have blossoms of pink flowers. Okay, and in autumn they used to bear fruits. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games to listen to them. "How happy we are," they cried to each other. So there were birds also, and they used to sing very sweetly, and children used to like their song. So they sometimes stop their games and they just continue to listen to them, and they said to each other that they were very happy while playing in the giant's garden. Let us come to the next paragraph. One day the giant came back to his castle. He had been to visit his friend the Cornish ogre and had stayed with him for 7 years. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. So one day the giant came back to his castle. So where did he went for so long? So for 7 years he went to one of his Cornish ogre named friend. Okay, so he had one friend whose name was Cornish ogre. So here the description is given. Cornish ogre, it is also a giant. He was also a giant, and he belonged to which country? He belonged to England. Okay, so this giant went to Cornish ogre and he stayed with him for 7 years, and when the time period was over, he returned back. Okay, and when he arrived, what did he saw? He saw that many children were playing in his garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice. What is the meaning of gruff? Gruff means rough and low in pitch. His voice was very rough and low in pitch, and the children ran away. Obviously, when the children saw the giant, they all were very scared and they ran away. "My own garden is my own garden," said the giant. "I will allow nobody to play in it but myself." So he built a high wall all round it and put up a notice board, trespassers will be prosecuted. So the giant, after he returned from his friend's house, Cornish ogre, he saw that many children were playing in his garden, and when he saw that, he became very angry, and he said that what these children are doing there in his garden. And then he said to himself that this is my garden and I will allow nobody to play in my garden. So what he did, he built a very high wall around his garden, and then there he hung a notice board which said trespassers will be prosecuted. It means that property belonged to giant, and whoever tries to enter into his property without his permission, he will take some action against that person. Okay, so here put a notice board that trespassers will be prosecuted. So this shows that the giant was very selfish in nature. The poor children now had here to play. They tried to play on road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander round. So these poor children, they didn't have any place to go and play now, because the giant garden was very beautiful. It had soft green grass, and now they have to play on road, and these roads were very dusty and full of hard stones. Okay, and they didn't like this kind of place to play, so they just stopped playing. Okay, now let us turn the page and read further. So they used to wander round the high wall with their lessons when their lessons were over, and talk about the beautiful garden inside. How happy we were there, they said to each other. So after their class were over, they used to talk to each other. Okay, so what did they used to talk to each other? What did they used to say each other? That they were very happy when the giant was not there. That time they were very happy enjoying in their garden. Okay, but now they couldn't enjoy anymore. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant, it was still winter. You can see in the picture, everywhere during the spring season there were flowers. Okay, but in the giant garden it was still spring. It was still covered with lot of snow. Only in the garden of selfish giant it was still winter, and the birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children and the trees forgot to blossom. Means there in the giant garden the trees also were used to the children. So when the children didn't came to the garden, the trees also stopped blossoming and birds stopped singing. So the giant garden was looking very dull. The bird did not care to sing in. Once a beautiful flower put its head out from the grass, but when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost. Spring has forgotten this garden, they cried, so we will live here all the year round. So what happened? When the children stopped coming into giant's garden, the trees were very sad, birds were very sad. So neither the tree blossomed there nor the birds used to sing. And this snow, they were very happy. Okay, winter season there, also it was winter season. When everywhere it was a spring, only in giant garden it was covered with snow all around. Once a small little flower tried to bloom outside, but when it saw that there were no children playing, it became so sad that it again went inside the ground. And the only thing that was happy that time was snow and the frost. Spring has forgotten this garden, they said, and they cried that we will live happily all year around. Means there will be no spring now in the giant garden, and we will live happily all year around. Who said this? It was said by the snow and the frost, because that time giant garden was only covered with snow and frost, while everywhere there was a season of spring. Great white cloak and the frost painted all the trees silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and he came. What is the meaning of cloak? Cloak means a long, loose outer garment. Here it is used as a metaphor. Okay, so here cloak is used as a metaphor. It means a long, loose garment, a long, loose cloth. Okay, so there, great white cloak, it means snow. Snow and frost covered the trees silver. So now the trees were no more looking green in color, but they were looking very dull. They were looking silver in color. Why? Because they were covered with snow. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them. He came. He was wrapped in furs, and he rode all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down. This is a delightful spot, he said. We must ask the hail to visit us. So first, the snow invited the northern wind. The northern wind were very cold, and it used to blow every time, and it used to roar. So here roar word is used. Okay, so the northern wind roared all day. It blew all day, and he said that he liked this spot. He liked Giant's garden. It is a delightful spot for the northern wind. He said that he will also invite hail. Hail means small hard pellets of ice. Okay, small stones of ice. So he said that he will invite hail to visit him. So the hail also came. Now the giant garden, it was entirely cold and freezing. There were snow covered areas, and northern wind was blowing, roaring, and hail was also there now. So every day for 3 hours he rattled on the roof of the castle. Means the castle in which giant live, there the hail used to rattle every day for 3 hours. Okay, and he broke most of the slates, and then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could go. He was dressed in grey, and his breath was like ice. So everything now in the garden was changed. There were no colors. Everywhere it was just cold and freezing. I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming, said the selfish giant. So what does the giant say? He said that he cannot understand why the spring is not coming. And he sat at the window and he looked out at his cold white garden. He said, what did the sad giant say now? That I hope there will be a change in the weather. The giant was very surprised that in other parts of that area spring was already there, but in giant's garden there were no spring. Only it was still snowy, it was still freezing. So giant was very much surprised, and he was saying, by disappointment, he was saying that he cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming. And he said that he hoped he will see this change in the weather. This line is being spoken by the selfish giant. But the spring never came, nor the summer. So neither the spring came nor the summer season came. Means no season was coming in giant's garden. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. Even the autumn season, in which golden fruits used to come in the giant garden, there were no golden fruits also. Means this time neither the spring season came, nor the autumn, nor the summer season came. He is too selfish, she said. Who said this word? This word was said by autumn season. So it was always winter there. So which season used to prevail there? It was winter season. And the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees. Means there was entirely covered with snow, and no other season except the winter season was present in the giant's garden. One morning the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. So one morning the giant just got awoke. Okay, he heard that there was lovely music being played somewhere. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. The giant thought that there might be king's musicians who are playing some beautiful music, so he just got up and he started to look around whether it is king's musicians or not. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window. So what is the meaning of linnet? Linnet is a kind of songbird. It's a kind of bird which is brown and grey in color with reddish color breast and forehead. So this bird was singing the song. But it was so long since he had heard a bird sing in his garden. Means for so long, since the children stopped visiting in Giant's garden, there were no birds. So after such a long time period, a bird came and started to sing in Giant's garden. So he was little surprised. It seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head and the north wind ceased roaring. Ceased means stopped. So the hail also stopped dancing in the Giant's garden, and the north wind suddenly also stopped roaring, and delicious perfume was spread all over in the open casement. I believe the spring has come at last. So the giant said to himself that he believes that now spring season have finally came in his garden. He said, and he jumped out of bed and looked out. So he, in surprise, in happiness, he jumped out of his bed and he looked outside. What did he see? He saw a most wonderful sight. He was delighted by the sight he saw outside. So what did the giant saw? Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in, and they were sitting in the branches of the tree. In every tree that he could see, there was a little child, and the trees were so glad to have the children back that they had covered themselves with blossoms and were waving their arms gently above the children's head. When he saw the sight, he was so happy. He saw that in every wall, through the holes in the wall, little children have crept inside, and now they were sitting on the branches of the tree. In every tree he could see little child, and the trees were also very happy. They were also glad that finally these little children came back to them, and they were covering and gently caressing the children's head. Birds also started to fly around, twittering with delight, and flowers also were looking up through the green grass. Flowers also blossomed, and they also were laughing because they saw that their little children have returned to Giant Garden. It was a lovely scene. So everything looked very delightful, very wonderful. Only in one corner it was still winter. So only in one corner it was still winter season. So why this happened? Though in every area, every side, the trees were covered again with blossoms, and children were so happy, but only in one corner there was still winter. So it was the farthest corner of the garden. It was the most farthest corner, and in it was standing a little boy. So there was standing a little boy where there was still winter. He was so small that he cannot reach up to the branches of the trees, and he was wandering all around it. He was crying bitterly. The boy was very small, and therefore he couldn't jump up the tree, and therefore he was crying bitterly. The poor tree was still quite covered with frost and snow. The tree was covered because without children they couldn't be happy. Without child embrace, the trees also couldn't blossom. Therefore the tree was also very sad because the boy was crying there. The north wind was blowing still there, and it was roaring above it. Climb up, little boy. The north wind was blowing that little boy climb up the tree, said the tree, and it went its branches down as low as it could. But the boy was so tiny. The tree came to help the boy. He also bent itself and bent its branches, and he also was there to help the boy to climb up. But the boy was so tiny that he couldn't climb up. Still after the tree also bent, the boy couldn't climb up the tree. And the giant heart melted as he looked out. Giant heart was melting. Giant was looking very sad now. He was disappointed by the scene. When he saw that the little boy was so tiny and he couldn't climb up, his heart melted. How selfish I have been, he said. Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the walls, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever. He was really very sorry for what he had done. So after looking at the scene that that poor boy was crying, and because the child was crying, the tree still was covered with snow and north wind was still roaring there. The giant understood that all this time there was no spring in his garden because children didn't used to come into his garden. So he understood that it is because of him only, it is because of that board, it is because of that wall he have created and stopped children to come into his garden, that the garden was still covered with winter for so long. So he decided to break all those walls and allow all the children to play now in his garden itself. So he said that now from now on my garden will be children's playground. So he crept down his stairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away. When the giant came downstairs, the children saw him and they were all frightened. Okay, they got frightened and scared and they all ran away from him. Only the little boy, who was full of tears, couldn't see the giant coming. He couldn't see. The little boy couldn't spot the giant because there were tears in his eyes. So he was very sad. And the giant suddenly he stole up behind him. He took the little boy gently in his hand and put him up into the tree. Okay, and the tree, as the giant kept the child over the tree once again blossomed with beautiful flowers, and birds came there and sing on it. And the little boy, he was so happy that he stretched both his arms and he flung them round to the giant's neck. Okay, he was very happy because of what giant did. He helped the little boy to climb up the tree. So he stretched out both his arms and flung them around the giant's neck. And then what happened? He kissed him. The little boy kissed him out of love, and the other children, when they saw that this giant is again friendly with this little boy, the other children too, they also came near the giant, as they were no more frightened from him, they were no more scared from him. And with them came the spring, means as the children returned back, spring once again came. So it's your garden now, little children, said the giant, and he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. So he said finally to all the children that now this garden belongs to them and they can play whenever they want. And then he took a big axe, and then what he did, he broke the wall he had once built for them. When the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they used to find that the giant was always busy in playing with all these children in the most beautiful garden they have ever seen. So this is the story of the selfish giant. I hope you all understood the story. Thank you.